This is chapter 14, fungi. So we are talking about the last section of the eukaryotes. So we've talked about plants, we talked about the protists, you have a lab about the animals, and these are the fungi. So as you can see here, fungi and plants do actually work together. They are partners, but they are not related. They, for a long time, were actually put in the same group. But then it was found that fungi are more closely related to animals like ourselves than they are to plants. So let's take a look at what makes a fungus, just like we saw with the plants. So first thing is, how do they get their food? So fungi are either decomposers, so they are going to get their energy by breaking down tissues. So you can see breaking down tissues or dead organisms. So that's one option. The other option is to be what we call a symbiont. So a symbiont is right here, you can see a symbiont means that you live with another organism. Now, in the case of fungi, that means that they're going to get their nutrients from other living organisms. So for fungi, that means they're going to basically be parasites. So they're either going to break down organisms or material from other organisms, like say carbohydrates, or they're going to actually absorb them from living organisms. So this is one of the reasons why they are more related to us than they are to plants, because they're actually getting their food in a very similar way. Why did they think they were plants for so long? Well, they are sessile. They are anchored to whatever they are feeding on. They don't move. So this is a big reason why they kind of thought they were kind of like plants. They don't move around. Now they do grow. They do grow out, just like we would see with a plant, but they don't move. So they don't pick up the whole group of the fungus and then move to another area. The last characteristic that makes a fungus is that they have cell walls. So again, kind of like a plant, but the cell walls are actually made out of a different material. They are made out of this material called chitin. So chitin is a chemical that is made out of the same stuff that the exoskeletons, the outsides of insects are made out of. So again, more like an animal. Remember, plants have their cell walls made out of cellulose. So two different chemicals that they're using to make these cell walls. So if you've ever eaten a raw mushroom, this is why they're kind of crunchy, but not the same kind of crunchy as a raw vegetable. Okay. So here's where the fungi go on that tree. So you can see plants are way down here with our ancestral protist that we're related to, but then the branches for the fungi are up here with animals. So we are more closely related to those animals or to the fungi than the fungi are to the plants. So who are the fungi? So we know that they're sessile, we know that they have those chitin cell walls, and we know that they eat other stuff. These are common ones that you would know. So we've got the things that make mushrooms. So that's how most people know fungi, is from the edible parts. But there are actually a lot of mushrooms that are not edible. So keep that in mind. In fact, most mushrooms are inedible. They are poisonous. We've got penicillium. So that one's pretty famous as far as the fungi go. The molds. So any molds, any furry stuff you find growing on your food, they are the decomposers that are hanging out eating it. So if you find it on bread or on, fruits and vegetables, that is a fungus. And then yeast. So I've got my little buddy, he's a little beat up, but here's my little microbe yeast. And this guy is the only unicellular group of fungus. So you can see these guys are just single cells, and this is why multicellularity is not one of the characteristics for fungi. Remember, for a plant, you have to have you have to be multicellular. But for fungus, you don't, because this whole group of yeasts are going to be single cell organisms. So we find fungi in a huge variety of habitats. We actually find fungus in almost the same variety of habitats that we do the bacteria and the archaea. So, the thing is, they actually do have a common structure. The only group that doesn't have this common structure is the yeast. So what is the common structure? The common structure is this guy, this mycelium. So what is a mycelium? Well, a mycelium is the actual structure of a fungus. When most people think of fungus, they think of the mushrooms. But this is the actual fungus. The mushrooms are the reproductive part of a fungus. This is the mycelium, this big net type structure. And if you zoomed in on it, you get these guys. These individual strands are called hyphae. So a mycelium is basically a big mat of these hyphae. They kind of look like hair. And so it's just this huge mat type network of these guys. You can see it kind of looks feathery and branchy, and that's how fungi grow. If you've ever flipped over a rock or a log out in the forest, I'm guessing you've probably seen something like this. This is the actual fungus. So what's the benefit of this structure? The big benefit of this structure is it allows them to have a huge surface area. So by having all these individual hairs, they can have this big surface area in order to gather nutrients and to gather water. Because the interesting thing about fungi is how they eat. So what they do is, let me get a little fungus cell drawn here. Now, when we eat, the way we eat is we ingest, meaning that we eat it, and then we digest it, right? So it goes down into our stomach and our intestines, and then we break it down. Well, the way a fungus eats is, here's its food, right? So here, that's the food. The fungus is going to send out its enzymes, and they're going to go out and into the food and break down the food. So they're going to digest it out here, and then when it's digested, then they bring it inside. So they digest, then ingest. So they do it the opposite way that we do. And so by having this big surface area, it allows them to do it over a big area to feed their entire body. Okay. So what then is the largest living organism in the world? So we saw conifers, tallest organism and oldest organism. The largest living organism in the world is a fungus. So how is that so? Well, it's because of this mycelium. So the largest living organism that we have measured by area on Earth is this yellow honey mushroom fungus. Now, this is the only part of it that you'll see, the actual mushrooms. These come above ground. The rest of the organism is actually below ground. It's down in the soil. And they figured out that one organism, so one individual of this out in Oregon, actually covers 4 square miles underground. They did genetic testing to figure out how much of the fungus, was growing in the soil. And it's 4 square miles. To give you an idea of what that means, why is there a football field here? That little red rectangle inside of this is the football field. So that little guy right there is the football field, to give you an idea of how big this guy is underground. And then you can see the blue whale, African elephant, and a human. as far as scale reference. So this is a huge individual. And again, all we ever see of it is the mushroom part, the part that comes above ground, and that's their reproductive structure. So how do the fungi reproduce? Now, I'm not going to test you on this. I just want to show you how they do it and how weird they are. Now, this is just one group of the fungus. So here is the part that we all think of, right, as fungus. But this is their reproductive structure. So this section up in the gill part, these little guys right here, if you've ever looked at a mushroom from a pizza or whatever, you've probably seen these guys. That section right there is going to create diploid cells right at the tips, and those are going to divide to make haploid spores. So these guys are going to undergo meiosis, and these guys are going to make haploid spores and bust open. Those spores are going to get blown around by the wind and eventually land in some sort of habitat, soil, a damp area, whatever it might be for that specific fungus. They'll start growing hyphae. They'll start growing those hairs to make a mycelium. Eventually, they'll grow together to create this cell right here, this blue one that you see. This blue cell is what we call a dikaryotic stage. If you look real closely, it's got 2 nuclei. That's the dikaryote, 2 nuclei. All of the other cells, if you look, only have 1. This right here is what's going to grow the mushroom. And so that right there is what's going to create the reproductive part of the fungus. Fungi are weird. They are completely different as far as their reproduction. No other group of eukaryotes do this, as far as we know. So they have these 3 different life stages that they undergo for their reproduction. So the mushroom part, as you may be aware, are edible, some of them. So most of us are familiar with things like portobello mushrooms, especially as a replacement for hamburgers now. Shiitake mushrooms, these are common in Asian dishes. They're the little ones that kind of look like umbrellas. So if you're not sure what I'm talking about, they're the ones that have the real skinny stems with the kind of real thin caps on them like this. White button mushrooms, we saw those in another picture. These are the ones that commonly show up in your pizza or in canned mushrooms. These guys are fairly common nowadays because we can actually grow them in, like factories or farm type situations. These guys, truffles, on the other hand, these can sell for as much as $3,500 per pound, and I've actually seen them a little higher than that. So why are they so expensive? Well, let's take a look at what these guys look like. So there's our portobello mushroom. Here's a truffle. And I know that they look weird. They look like little weird potatoes. And there's a reason for that. These are only found underground. Unlike most of the mushrooms, or the other name for it is a fruiting body, these are found underground. And the only way you can find them is if you have, and this is going to sound weird, some of you may be aware of this, you need to have a truffle hunting pig. Yes, you heard me correctly, a truffle hunting pig. Pigs can smell a chemical that these truffles let off, and they love to eat truffles. And so they will help you find where they're located when they are up. And then you tie off the pigs so that they can't eat your truffles as you dig them up, and then you can harvest them. So the most common way today that most people have had truffles is via truffle oil. It's the less expensive way to have truffles. So that is what a truffle looks like. That's not the chocolate version. I'm going to post the video for the fruiting bodies. Look closely for the smoke in the video. That smoke are the spores that are coming off of these fruiting bodies. By the way, this is a puffball. Please don't kick them. When you kick them, they do make a cool poof, but those are the spores that aren't ready yet to be let go. So I will pick up in the next video with more about fungi.